So hi everyone. Wow. Bolivia, Ukraine, Munich, USA. So cool. Philadelphia. Yay. So super happy to be here. I see a lot of people from a lot of places in the chat. So I developed an amazing ability during the pandemic, which is talking while reading a chat. So if you have questions, I can try to take them during the talk, or we will also like gather them and I can answer at the end of the talk. So whatever's easier for you. So I will talk about internal UX research in enterprises, which is a topic that is super dear to me because it's basically the kind of environments I'm working in. So I'm Stéphanie Walter. I'm a UX researcher and UX designer. And as she explained, I'm from Luxembourg. I live and work there. I've been working in UX since for 12 years now. I worked for web agencies, university, and today I'm a consultant. So I mostly work directly within client teams for long-term missions. I've worked in Germany, in France, and now in Luxembourg. And yeah, I work for the European Investment Bank, which I will talk a little bit later about what we do. So what does enterprise UX even mean? I think it's kind of hard to find a definition of that, but it could be summarized as the design of softwares and services that are used by internal employees to do their daily work. So you can find this kind of stuff in a lot of different domains like factory, retail, small businesses. There's also a lot of such softwares in healthcare as well. I also worked for tools for car dealerships. So it was a tool to help them do different things, but the tool was mostly used by people in the car dealership. So you as an end customer, you can go to a BMW car dealership, but you will never see these tools. It's a tool that are used by people directly working there. And things like crane monitoring, also this kind of tool. So I don't know if anyone saw an interface to do some crane monitoring, but yeah, it's quite a fun thing. So it can be like CRM, accounting softwares, project management tool, HR, intranet, all of that kind of stuff.
Stephanie, I think you already, we can now see your screen, not your presentation. When we can see your blog in the browser. Maybe
cool. Yay, why is it? That's weird. Keynote. Is it okay now?
Now we can see its slide. Perfect.
I don't even understand why it... Okay, anyway, I love that it worked before. So yeah, anyway, you just missed two very nice slides. That's it. So yeah, the common thing with all of tools is you find when you ask people what it looks like, they say it's ugly and it's hard to use. So the question is, what can we do about that? We can do a lot actually. So let me talk a little bit about our user research process on the internal tool I'm currently working on. A little bit of context with the authorization of my clients. So I work for the European Investment Bank. It's a bank. It's just that instead of giving loans to individuals, we give loans to bigger companies or countries. So the tool I'm working on is kind of a project management tool that lets you follow everything that you can do with a bank loan, from contracts to disbursing the money, reimbursing, things like that. And I arrived at this project, so I think it was built more than 10 years ago. It was built in an old technology, and today we are rebuilding this tool and we are migrating it to a new JavaScript framework. And all the way, we are bringing new features. And I'm the first designer who never worked on this one. So I have this really old school interface that we are migrating, to give you some context. So the first thing we did for migrating it is we started with analysis of the data. We discovered we have 400 pages. So the question is, okay, we have 400 pages. We're not going to migrate the 400 pages in 1 month. How might we proceed to migrate those? And we basically started with quantitative data. So we don't have a Google Analytics there, but we have server logs. So what we did is we went through the server log, which is the things at the top left, and we have all of those pages, and we have a list of the pages that are most visited. This gives us what the people are looking at it doesn't really help us understand why they're visiting this. But at least we have a start. We kind of know a little bit more where we can dig. So once we have the start, we said, you know what we are going to do is we are going to interview people to understand what the hell they're doing with those pages. And is it even worth migrating it? So we have this process where we split our users in groups. We have, I think, 1,000 different users. And we can have two things. We have groups that are based on a process. Like we have a lot of bank process, which is often drafting documents. And then we do user research around a specific process. But we also do user research around the needs of a specific directorate in the bank. So a group, for instance, we have a group that is composed of all the lawyers. So at some point, the question is, what do the lawyer need when they will migrate to the new interface? So we do one-on-one session and interview with them. We recruit them. And this is kind of an interview, but it's more like task-oriented. So what we ask them, we have this little framework. So on my screen, you see a version, which is an old paper version of the framework when we used to do face-to-face interviews. Now we have the same thing in Miro, and it's the same framework, it's just digitalized. So we ask them about their tasks and activities, and we try to understand the dependencies, what tools do they need, but also like kind of what kind of knowledge do they need, and of course the pain points, and sometimes if they had a magic wand, how would they kind of improve that? So it's kind of not an interview to understand, okay, well, what's your daily, what's your life, what's your, I don't know, sometimes you ask about feelings, things like that. This is more like really kind of task-oriented to really understand the process behind all of that. The thing is, we work in Agile, so we also have a beta version of the new website that is already online. So once they've done the interview, we invite them for a longer session, which is usually 1 hour. And it's kind of a weird thing between usability testing, but not really usability testing, and observation. So normally when you do usability testing, you have a script, you follow the script, and you're not supposed to answer questions. Here, what we ask them is, okay, we discussed, you are doing that in the interface. Please share your screen and try to do whatever you needed to do with the old interface today, but with the new one. Most of the time they start with a search. So we observe them while they are going through the new interface. We gather all of those feedback. But of course, this is where kind of it's not really a usability test. If they have questions, if they are stuck, we are still going to answer those kind of questions. And once this is over, most of the people ask if they can keep the access, which is kind of good things. Like, I want to work with the new one. Like, yes, that's good. So what we do is we tell them you can keep the access, please work with it. And what we have is the little thing at the bottom of the screen here is a user diary. So I work in a bank, people love Excel sheets. So we decided to do the user diary as an Excel sheet, and we give them this diary. The idea is that they have it for 1 month, and the trigger is whenever you're trying to do something, but you can't and you have to open the old interface, please log what you are trying to do and why you can't do it. Is it because it's broken? Is it because you didn't find it? Or is it because it's a content we haven't migrated yet? So with all of that, we actually have a ton of data about our users. And in order to prioritize a little bit how we are going to go deeper into usability testing for specific things, we have this priority matrix. So we do a meeting with business, with developers, and we ask, basically we have this kind of numbers, and we have one column for the business value, one column for the user value, and then we have one column for how long it's going to take to design that and how long it's going to take to develop that. And then my colleague created the plotting. I can do that in Excel, I admit he did that. And what we are interested into is kind of first the quick wins. It's things that are easy to develop and design and that have super high value for the users. And then the second thing is like things that are super high value for the users. So it's around here, but that might be complex. And those are the things where we are going to invest actually more user research. Any chance to view the header of the diary sheets? In the slide, no, because it's super pixelized, but maybe I can show you after the talk during the Q&A. So we have two things. We have fast track. Fast track is Things that are easy to migrate, we might not need specific research on that. We know how to migrate this table. So for that, we have a design system, and it's mostly going to be UI design, implementation, and then feedback during the development, the feedback session. And then we have the heavy stuff. And this is where it starts to become really interesting as a designer, is specific research for big topics. So this is where we are actually going to invest. An example of that is the new search, because we have a super complicated search with a lot of filtering and option. And for that, we did a lot of research. We did actual prototype. We did some really usability testing with, I think, like 20 users or something like that. We also did the heavy lifting of all the research for a mobile application that is kind of a companion app for something. So we invest in more research, but like for really, really big topic where we want to be sure that we are not going to develop something that is not going to work. And then, of course, we measure stuff. So we installed Matomo because we can have it internally. And for those who don't know, it's like Google Analytics, but you can install it on your own servers, which is better for privacy, for security reason also. So in Matomo, we kind of monitor usage. So we're interested into seeing how many people migrated, what's the daily usage of that. We also started measuring perceived usability and usefulness with a survey that is called UMOX. For now, we only have one measurement, but the idea is to do that every quarter and see how the perceived usability and usefulness is going to evolve. And then we have feedbacks and verbatims for our users. That is also things that we show to stakeholders to say, look, people are actually super happy. Like one of my favorite one is something like we went from MS-DOS to macOS. It's like, yeah. And the other one is it's easier to migrate from the old interface to the new one than to migrate from Skype to Teams. Like, yeah, that's actually a good verbatim. So yeah, this is our process. And if you know what's a user-centered process, all of those like 4 steps: analyze, understand, design, explore, prototype, then test, evaluate, measure, learn, update, and implement. This is kind of basically a standard UCD process applied to enterprise UX. The big difference is that, again, we are more like task-oriented. I think that a lot of people who do this kind of research. So, of course, this is the fun part. There's kind of a lot of challenges if you want to work in such areas. The first one is bad user experience is the norm because perceived value of design is low. So sadly, often in those kind of areas, people kind of got used to bad design. And it's sometimes a little bit hard to make them understand that they need a designer on a process. So first, a lot of people still think design is just about making things pretty. So they think you can just like slap some design gloss over the whole interface and it will make things better for the users. But if you have something that is built on kind of flows that don't work and things like that, just having pretty buttons won't help. And then there's this whole thing where basically the users are stuck into this interface. So for a lot of people, it's like, yeah, why bother investing in design? There's no competition anyways. Those people have to use it on a daily basis. So, you know, whatever. So it's sad, but I still see that a lot. And then there's also kind of years of IT people building things with our designers, because most of those tools, they're often built with teams of engineers. There's a question on how do you change your mindset? I have a few answers for that for you. It's the next slide. So the question is, what can we do about that? First, let's start with the good news for us designers is users are actually starting to demand a better experience, especially with enterprise tools. They don't understand why they are stuck at work with horrible things, while at home they can use super easy to use things like cloud synchronization. I have people who don't understand why they still have to send a Word document and use the comments in the column, while at home they can use Google Docs and they can edit a document with other people. I know why. I know the technical reason behind that, but still, like for our user, they're like, I have this amazing tool at home. Why can't I have the same thing at work? So this is kind of something interesting. Is more and more people are demanding a better experience. So this is also why those kind of companies start hiring more designers. I would say to improve that, make the process transparent. Like, don't just show mockups, because then people will feel, again, design is about making things pretty, but really help people understand the whole process, the whole design process, like the complex part, the ugly part, the analysis, the head scratching, and how you were able to go from this horrible table to a solution that is actually a little bit more user-friendly. Then if there's no designer yet in such area, I would say turn business analysts, developers, and QAs into design advocates. There's a lot of companies where I was able to enter through developers, because I did a talk in front of developers, or just because developers know that people like us, like UX researchers and design, exist, and they are actually pushing their bosses, their stakeholder, to hire us, because they're just like tired to have to take those design decisions, because it's not their job, basically. So a lot of developers are actually super happy to work with designers. So I would say use them as advocates. And also, once I work with them, I do a lot of things to just like bridge the gap. So I will attend agile meeting. I will be part of the team. I will also discuss design solution upfront with my developers and BA, so that I make sure it's easy to understand and easy to implement. And I'm always there when I have question about something. I will it will be my priority to reply to them. And I think don't bring an opinion to data fight, which is to convince people. If people need things like figures and measures, you need to do this kind of thing. This is also why we use some surveys, we use some verbatims, because at the end of the day, if you don't have like tangible proof that your design process is working, it might be really, really hard to convince people. Then another thing that can be a little bit challenging is the legacy. You are basically saddled with legacy, like data and user habits. So data can be things like we have this super big table in the interface that were built 10 years ago. Does it still make sense today? Or we have vocabulary consistencies, like there are really, really weird things in the interface. And some things don't make sense from a finance point of view. And the question is, should you fix it? But then people who are used to this kind of stuff might be completely lost. And then there's user habits, especially if you are redesigning an existing tool. So how to improve? I would say keep a candid eye to things, like question everything. Just because something is somewhere doesn't mean it's good, or it doesn't mean you need to migrate it like that. And don't take word for granted. It's like seek business help to understand what you see on the screens and to understand the business. And also for the user, there's a lot of change management that needs to be done to help them transition to new tools. So there's like about preparing and supporting them. So what we do is we work directly with support teams, and we are, again, always there for the users. We do a lot of one-to-one. We are super reassuring. We have a shared mailbox so that user can ask us questions directly if something isn't working. So it's all about making sure like you go with them because changes are really, really hard, especially for people who invested a lot of time in learning a tool they have to use every day. And then there's a lot of security and tool constraints, which can be really frustrating as a designer, because I'm not allowed to use tools in the cloud officially. So it means I can't use Figma. So as a designer, sometimes you might have to kind of give up on your favorite tools. So if you work in such environments, you have to be flexible and remember that the tool doesn't make the designer. So at the end of the day, it's the process, it's the critical thinking, it's the analysis capability. And then, yeah, maybe accept you might not be as efficient as first. I was like, yeah, but if I had this tool, I would do that in less time. I was like, yeah, but it's okay, it is what it is. And we have the security constraints, so we need to work with them. Then those are the challenge. So we might say, okay, but why do you work in such environments then? The first thing is I like complex information architecture. I think it's kind of a really interesting thing to work with. So It kind of makes me feel like a detective some days. And I think it's rewarding when we start with something that is super complex. And at some point, you kind of make sense of the complexity. As a designer, we tend to be super curious, and making sense of all of that is really fun. Then, and this is I think my favorite part, is it's easier to access people because they internal users. So I can just go into the corridors and try to find some people because I know where they are. I'm joking around, but we did that for a few groups. So recruitment is kind of, I think, easier. And what we always do is once we did an interview with someone, we asked them for referrals, like, okay, is there any other colleagues we might be able to talk to? And then we have this kind of chain reaction of finding people to talk to and having kind of this bigger user base for our beta testing. The thing is, people are busy, so make sure that you make the time worth. It's sometimes you can only have 15 minutes or things like that, so it might be a little bit complex. Why can't you use cloud-based tools? Because security? Yeah, I'm not saying it's, it's basically because security. Then why? Because security, I don't know. It's a bank, so I have honestly stopped questioning it. We use cloud tool, but internal cloud. So basically we have Jira, we have GitHub, but they're hosted on servers that are within the company. Then there's also a lot of improvement opportunities. So many of those apps are really, really hard to use. So there's a kind of a thing, an untapped potential for designers there, and a big growth, I think, that we need to find in this kind of industries. And if you claim to be kind of a problem solvers, I think this is the perfect environment. There's also surprising things sometimes for someone who comes from B2C. There's this famous quote that when viral, a user interface is like a job, you have to explain it. If you have to explain it, it's not that good. I hate that sentence. I'm sorry, Mark is super nice, but I hate it because it doesn't really apply to my work. So the thing is, you might say, okay, but then what about training? So one thing that surprised me is that in such an environment, people actually expect trainings. You can make the interface as easy as you want. Training is part of the culture. And we have this spectrum of people that range from, I do not need training, let me discover things, to I will never click a button unless someone told me in training what this button is going to do. And we have to kind of do something for all of those users. So we have this training on demand. So people can come to training session if they want, but it's not mandatory. And then again, people expect things like FAQ, like training documents and all of that corporate stuff that goes around it. And you can just say, no, look, it's easy to use. We don't need that. It's like, no, this doesn't work. It's enterprise and people expect that. The cool thing though is training is again for me another way to gather feedback. So I will attend the training sessions. I will kind of take notes when people have doubts, when people have questions and things like that. So I propose we fix the quote for interface UX. A user interface is like a joke. I can agree with that part. Like any good joke, you might need some prior business knowledge to understand it. Doesn't make it a bad joke or a bad interface. If I'm telling you a joke, a quantum physics joke, like Schrodinger's cat joke, if you don't know what quantum physics is and what's the whole thing with that cat, you might not find that joke funny. Doesn't mean it's a bad joke, just that you don't have this prior knowledge. And then again, coming from a more B2C area, some generic UI tips might not apply for such tools. So, this whole more white space, make bigger headings, things like that. Forget about it. It's all about the data. So our design system was built by an external company, and they had this huge, super big image at the top of the page. It was taking, I think, like 30% of the screen height, and it was beautiful and amazing. And the first thing that user asked to remove from the mockups, because they're like, why would I want an image taking 30% of the page? Give me the data. And it's like, yeah, no, 12 people who wants to have less white space and things like that. So I joke about it, but if you have to work with a tool all day long, you want to see at some point a lot of data on the screen because you have to work with this data. Then there's this whole, design is all about making things simple. Yes and no, especially with complex businesses. So my advice is if a complex business can require complex interfaces, and it's really okay to have complex interfaces that are not like self-explanatory in this kind of areas, because people have to do complex things with that. So I will refer to my friend Morgan's talk on the UX efficient frontier if you need help finding these things. And it's always about finding the right balance between too complicated, but not also too simplify for this kind of users. User customization can be helpful. So this one might be a little bit surprising too, sometimes, because again, at school, they tell us design is all about making choice. So if you let user do the choice, you kind of gave up on design or something. But no, if you have to understand that if you work for interfaces that are used by a lot of different people to do different things all day long, but it's only one interface, actually having some customization, a mechanism can really, really help those people to be more efficient. If someone never cares about half of the screen, I think it's perfectly valid that they ask, can I have a way to remove all those content because I don't need it ever. And then do not truncate, never. Again, it sounds kind of obvious, but when I arrived on a project, I had like these super big tables. I don't know how many columns, and it didn't fit the screen. So the developers decided to truncate the names and the numbers. Super frustrating to have numbers truncated, but also the name truncation was annoying because they have a lot of contracts that start with the same name. So now users have a list of contracts that all start the same, and they have no idea which one is which. So they introduced, you can hover the thing if you want to see the whole name of the contract, but come on, it's really, really annoying. So this is the kind of feedback we get, like, please do not truncate data because it's annoying to use otherwise. And then the last thing is users are not used to user-centered process in such areas, and it can be sometimes hard to express a need and not express a solution. So let me explain. I was doing this in a task interview with someone, and she was on a page where you had a list of projects. And she said, and here I really need an export to Excel button. I was like, okay, but you don't have an export to Excel button. So please, can you show me how you manage to do your work without the export to Excel button that you say you need? So she gets the whole table, she copies it, she pastes it in Excel. And there was like, okay, now what do you do with that? And she goes into the status of the project, and she uses an Excel filters, and she removes all the projects that don't have an active status. And she's like, yeah, I don't care if they're not active. I don't work on them anymore. So I want to remove them from the list. So she says she needs an export to Excel button because that's the way she does it today. But actually, if we are going to rebuild that, we might be able to solve that with something else. So what we did is we have this table in the browser, and now we added filters directly to the table. So she says she needs an export to Excel, but actually what she really needs is just a way to filter out all the not active project of the table. And that is sometimes a little bit hard because people, I think it's really hard to express a need. So I think it's even more important in our job as researchers to really kind of dig deeper to find those needs. So my advice, if you want to grow as a designer in such environment, would be first, content might be here for a reason. It's tempted to say, yeah, we'll remove 90% of the content of the screen because I don't know, it doesn't make sense. But at some point, maybe there's a technical or there's a business reason for that. But at the same time, you are allowed to question it. So you need to understand the bigger picture. And if you find out that, yeah, actually some of that content doesn't make sense, then yes, of course, you can remove it. But just make sure before that it's actually something that's not used. So this is why I like kind of having this candid eye, because I don't come from finance. I don't have a finance background. So whenever there's something that is not consistent, my brain will go like, what? I don't understand. And then when you start talking to people, they're like, Actually, you're right. This doesn't make sense. How might we improve that? Then I would say, don't try to force users into your ideal flow. I see that so much in B2C, and in B2B and enterprise UX, it's horrible because those people have to work on a daily basis with those tools. So if you force them into your ideal flow, it will be a mess, and they will be frustrated, and they might maybe even not be able to use your tool. So start with the business process and then build around the flow around it. Also, find people help you get familiar with the business jargon before talking to the user. As I said, those people are really, really busy. So make sure that you don't arrive in a user interview and you don't understand half of the stuff and you have to ask them to explain you every single acronyms, because otherwise you will not be able to complete the session. So I usually ask BAs and developers for that. That being said, sometimes I also like when people explain stuff to me in their own words, because again, if I have like a lot of people who will explain me stuff in their own word and I discover that everyone explains something else, maybe we have a naming problem, maybe we have a business problem here. So it's always kind of finding the right balance. And last but not least, complexity is scary. And I think it's okay to acknowledge that you feel overwhelmed a little bit, like, oh my God, what am I going to do with this table? And breathe, take a deep breath, because the most complex problem can be cut into small places and small parts. So this is my really, really, really honest design process. It started with complexity, chaos, fear, like, oh my God, what's this giant bowl of spaghetti? How am I supposed to deal it? What am I even doing here? Gosh, panic. And then I'm going to talk to people like business analysts, developer, my colleagues. And by talking to them, I will see pattern. I will kind of find little pieces of spaghetti that I can just like try to get out and understand a little bit better. And then user research is going to help me find and understand more of this puzzle and understand how is those things clicking and working together. And with all of that, then I'm able to make sense of the giant chaos, of the giant mess and the scary thing. And the things start clicking into place, and then I can propose a design solution. And that's it. So I think there's a big need for UX designer in such an environment. And if you're interested, that would be amazing.